to everybody. My name is Marieke Leegwater. I am really honored to lead this webinar series from the Sustainable Palm Oil Choice Initiative. And during this webinar today, we are looking for more sustainable palm oil frontrunners. And for that purpose, I am joined here by Ms. Sabrina Krebsbach of WWF. Hi, Sabrina. Welcome
Hi,
to you.
Marieke. Hi, everyone. Thank you.
Sabrina works as Agricultural Commodities Specialist in the UK at WWF. And this means she works on corporate engagement and advocacy that will help to end or reduce deforestation and land conversion in commodity supply chains, including palm oil. But this time, this will be a little bit new in this webinar. Before we get started, I would like to see if we can have more involvement of you in this conversation. So you've seen, all of you can send questions through the Q&A functions, and I will put them to Sabrina and myself. But this time we also have the opportunity to upvote questions by others you would like to see answered. And what we want to do is we want to actually invite the person with the highest voted question to turn their camera on and ask it. But as there are people who may not be willing to do that or like that, we would like to ask you to, if you're fine, put the letter X at the end of your question. So if you're okay to go on video and ask your question live, put X at the end of the question. So the other thing is we will do 3 polling questions in this webinar. So if you don't want to ask a question, just participate in the polls and we'll still have your voice in it. And then, Owen, I think we're ready for the first polling question that we can bring out here. The question is, are you buying sustainable palm oil? And while you're voting, I want to give you 2 notes. The first is this webinar will be recorded, so we can put it on the SPOC website for others to listen or later. So also if you have to run halfway, you can listen it back. And the other point is this time, also a new feature, we will stop at 11:50 set, and there will be a SPOC exchange session at the end. So you can hang around for 10 more minutes or even a little bit longer if you like. And we have one sort of chat group with everybody. Or if we are with too many, my colleagues, technical colleagues, will split us up. I'm not sure. Do we have the results of the poll yet, Owen? Yes. Oh, 70% already buying. Perfect. And surely I realize like NGOs and associations probably won't buy. So I'm not too surprised that there are quite some people not buying yet. But thank you for this. So this is good to know. And with this, I propose we dig in with the first question to Sabrina. Sabrina, tell me, now I see my other screen doesn't work, that's nice. Why are you involved in this work around palm oil, and why is it important for you to work on this?
Thank you, Marieke, and hi, everyone. Really happy to be here. An impressive audience indeed. So I've been working at the intersection of corporate sustainability and sustainable food systems for the past 7 years now, and I've seen how food systems and food and agriculture can be a force for nature restoration rather than what it is now the single biggest threat to nature. We know, of course, that food and land use systems generate tremendous hidden environmental, health, and inclusion costs. And I guess the reason why I'm working on this is that I'm really passionate about contributing to their transformation so that it can actually benefit people and nature instead. Now, more precisely, so as you said, I'm now with WWF UK as an agricultural commodities specialist. Before, I worked with Sustainability, which is a think tank and advisory firm, now part of the RM group. I've worked with UN Environment and also with Pure Projet, which is a French social enterprise that develops carbon insetting and ecosystem restoration projects in agricultural supply chains. Now, palm and soy as well, in particular, are my two main key areas of focus in my role at the WWF. We know, of course, that they're key drivers of deforestation and habitat conversion, and therefore priorities for action, really. So I haven't been working on palm specifically for as much as you have, Marieke, and many of those on the call as well. So I won't claim to be as much of an expert, but as you said, I do engage a lot of companies both on how to strengthen their own policies and support industry transformation, but also to mobilize their voice for policy change, for regulatory frameworks that can help really level the playing field and support sector-wide transformation towards sustainable, conversion-free commodity supply chains in general, and palm oil more specifically. So yeah, I'm really happy to be here for this conversation and looking forward to going through the recommendations, because as you said, I think we absolutely need more sustainable palm oil frontrunners out there, and hopefully the discussion today can help provide some ideas on how to start for companies that would like to get there.
Yeah, thanks, Sabrina. So we prepared a little bit of questions, but then, we'll take questions from the audience as we go along. The second question I want to ask you is, the title of this webinar is How to be a Sustainable Palm Oil Frontrunner. But what is your perspective? Can you really be a frontrunner with palm oil?
I think the short answer is absolutely you can, of course, and that's why we're having this discussion. But maybe before I fully respond to the question, I'd just like to make a brief observation, and I'm sure we can get back to it a bit later. But I know that a lot of people, and maybe some in the audience as well, could hear palm oil and they flinch and they think it's something that's inherently bad and it's something they should absolutely avoid. And of course, if this was true, being a sustainability leader and being a palm oil buyer wouldn't be compatible. And I just really like to start by emphasizing that this isn't true, that palm oil isn't the problem, that the problem is the way it's produced. So there are lots of misconceptions around palm oil in general that we need to address. And again, I think we'll come back to it in the discussion in more detail. It's clear, of course, that there are still major environmental and social issues in the industry that need to be solved. We know that unsustainable palm oil production continues to be a key driver of tropical deforestation, a huge threat to wildlife. It's also linked to human rights abuses. But we also know that an ill-advised substitution with other oils and fats can have lots of unintended consequences, and the issue is much more complex than a binary boycott, for example. So with that being said, it becomes really, really clear that we desperately need more sustainability leaders in palm oil supply chains. So to go back to your question on whether it's possible to be a front runner, of course, the answer is yes. And not only is it possible, it's really essential. So I just wanted to bring a bit of an illustration to show that it's possible. So some of you will know that WWF publishes palm oil buyer scorecards to assess actions taken by palm oil buyers on their supply chain and beyond to support the wider industry. So in our 2020 scorecard last year, although no company scored full marks, showing that there's room for progress for all, there was a small group of companies that showed to be leading the way. This includes Ferrero, Edeka, Kaufland, L'Oréal, and IKEA, for example. And I know we have some of these companies represented here today. So, and these really are companies that have placed sustainable, deforestation-free palm oil at the top of their business agenda. They're making, and not only are they making commitments, but they're following through on public commitments and robust commitments to embed sustainable palm oil in their own supply chains, as well as, and we'll see that's really key, investing time and resources beyond their supply chains to support a responsible industry as a whole beyond their specific scope. But as I said, these companies that are the ones that are leading the way, that they scored 19 or more out of a total of 22 possible points in our scorecard. This group of companies only represents 9% of the ones that we assessed. And of course, at the other end of the scale, we have a very large number of companies that have done little or nothing at all to ensure the sustainability of their own supply chain or to promote sustainability, of course, within the industry. So there's huge room for improvement for all, including for the leaders. And we do really hope that in the 2021 iteration of the scorecard, which will be coming later this year in the autumn, we hope that many more of the companies that are now in the middle of the pack will join the leaders to support large-scale transformation in the industry. And I might ask Owen if we can move to the second slide, just to finish on this. I just like to finish by adding that there's no excuse really not to be a leader in this space today, and some of the recommendations will go. Sorry, no, the one before. Thank you on the context. Thanks, and hopefully again the recommendations that we'll go through today can be a good place to start and can be some helpful observations. And this really applies to all companies that source palm oil. This imperative to urgently move in that direction really applies to all, and it's not just a nice to have. We've now had really over a decade of awareness, of commitments to eliminate the destruction of nature from commodity supply chains, including palm oil. And we know that these commitments have failed. We know that nature is in free fall and human rights abuses are still happening in commodity production. So as you can see here on the slide, that's why I wanted to have it up. We have 2020 Living Planet report show that an average decline of 68% in global wildlife population since 1970. That's in less than half a century. And the report also clearly demonstrates that the main cause of this dramatic decline in species population on land is habitat loss and degradation, including deforestation, driven by how we as humanity produce food, including, of course, palm oil, but also other commodities. We also, just a couple other observations on this, on the urgency to take action. We also published a report in January called Deforestation Fronts, which showed that 43 million hectares, which is an area roughly the size of Morocco or California, were lost across just 24 deforestation fronts in the world between 2004 and 2017. And finally, just as a bit of a connection to the context that we're all living in now, we know that the spread and the emergence of zoonotic diseases such as COVID-19 is just yet another tragic consequence, really, and an indicator of this accelerating pressure that we're putting on natural ecosystems. So just to conclude on this question, with all the information that we have now, there are really no excuses left for companies using palm oil to avoid taking action or to move too slowly, or to look at it positively as an opportunity. Now really is the time to step up for all of us. Now is the time for palm oil buyers to become front runners in sustainable palm oil. It's essential, and it's also the only way to go. It's a direction that regulatory frameworks are taking as well. As we know, consumer awareness is rising, although there is quite a bit of more work to be done on that. And like I said, pandemics like COVID-19 are just another illustration of how interconnected our own human health is to planetary health. So sustainability is the only way to ensure our future, and we absolutely need more and more leaders showing the way within the industry.
Thanks, Sabrina. A clear call to action. Can you maybe give an example of a company that does really well in your perspective? Absolutely.
I think I mentioned a few examples on the ones that are scoring 19 or more. I think Ferrero can be a good illustration among those ones, and we know that a lot of their score, and we'll get back to specifically what that means, what our expectations are, but a lot of their score can be explained because the company sources 100% segregated palm oil, and that shift towards physical supply chains is really key, and again we'll get back to it. They're also implementing a lot of other actions within and beyond their supply chain, which we really believe are really critical to achieve a sustainable industry as a whole. So just as a few examples there, so we talked about 100% segregated, but also they've committed to sourcing 100% SPO certified sustainable palm oil, and that applies across the entire corporate group, across all the countries where the group operates, and covers all types of palm oil use. So that question on scope, I think, is really key. And the second example, the palm that Ferrero uses is 100% traceable back to plantations, which really enables them to monitor and address social and environmental risk. Their suppliers, and that's really critical as well, their suppliers are required to have deforestation conversion-free commitments, and compliance is monitored. And the company also supports projects in producing palm oil producing landscapes. They're a member of the Palm Oil Innovation Group, which is a really key multi-stakeholder initiative encouraging players in the supply chain to adopt responsible palm oil production and procurement practices by building on their SPO and driving innovations in the sector. So just as a bit of an illustration, it's possible, and a lot of these practices, they really show that it's possible to implement that. It's within reach for palm oil buyers, and it would be absolutely great to see many more companies following these examples of the companies that are now leading the way. And of course, for all these commitments and implementation and reporting to be strengthened even further for the leaders, because as we said, no company scored full marks. There's room for progress for everyone, but there's a clear group that's leading the way there, I think, at the moment.
Thank you, Sabrina. I will ask you one more question, and then it's time for questions to be, let's say, the most upvoted question and comment. We organized this webinar, I think, to, let's say, allow people to get their own perspective on the need for sustainable palm oil and how to be a front runner. So I really hope we can get to questions from the, let's say, the well-respected wide audience. Question for my organizational team: are there questions being upvoted now, or do I miss them? I don't see a lot of questions or upvoted questions yet, so maybe I miss it. So let's see. Maybe this inspires people to put their questions with an X, preferably. Sabrina, I'll move to the next question to you. Can you tell me a little bit about the 8 recommendations on how to be a palm oil frontrunner, and what is it and how did it came about?
Great, happy to. Thank you, Marika. If we can just move to the next slide, because I think there's a lot to get through there. So I think it'll be helpful to have a bit of a visual at the same time, so we can follow the different recommendations. So on the document itself, the recommendations, they were developed as an initiative from yourselves, the SPOC, the Sustainable Palm Oil Choice Initiative. Yourself, Marika, of course, led their development and consulted us and Solidaridad, CI, and others. And I think we've had a few conversations about the need for a robust and aligned set of expectations from companies that buy palm oil in terms of ensuring, again, the sustainability of their own supply chain and contributing to a sustainable industry. And I'm really pleased to see this reflected in the recommendations outlined in the document. So we won't go through them in detail here because I know we're all keen to have a bit more of a discussion. So the full recommendations are on the website, but I'd just like to maybe walk through some highlights while people get some questions ready. So I'll just start with the first elements there on the slide. So firstly, and that's a bit of an overarching comment, but I think it's really key, and it may sound a bit repetitive because we've mentioned this before, but companies must act within and beyond their supply chain. So this means that not only must companies that use palm oil, not only must they ensure that their own supply chain is sustainable and free of deforestation, conversion, human rights abuse, but in addition, they have a responsibility and they have a role to play in supporting a sustainable industry as a whole. And we really expect companies to transition, especially front runners, to transition from de-risking just their own supply chain towards taking a more pro-environment and pro-people approach. So a lot of the following items actually refer back to this principle, but I thought it was important to just clarify it first. And so a second highlight there that you can see is that companies, of course, must commit to sourcing 100% RSPO certified sustainable palm oil across their global supply chains for all types of palm oil used. As you say, steps 2 and 3 that you can say they're very much about this first element of cleaning your own supply chain, which is really important as well, just not enough. And I'd say about this that committing to 100% RSPO sourcing is really a basic step that all palm oil buyers can take to motivate producers towards more sustainable methods of production. It's really a starting point for further action. It's a basic commitment. But in our last scorecard, we saw that only 3/4 of the companies assessed had a public commitment to source 100% certified sustainable palm oil. And although we know that 2020 was a bit of a crunch year by which many had committed to being deforestation free, and yet again, in the scorecard, only 2/3 of the companies committed to this year as being their deadline to be 100%. And I think although this is quite a basic initial element, again, you can't expect to be a palm oil frontrunner without taking this simple commitment. And again, it should, like we said in the example from Ferrero, you can't, this commitment should really cover the entire corporate group, all of the countries where the company operates. But again, just a starting point for further action. And I'll go to the third one, and then Marieke, let me know if there's anything more specific that you'd like us to dive into, or if it's the time to get into questions already. But the third one, I think, is really key. And again, the following ones will be more about transformation in the industry. This is still very much about cleaning your own supply chain. So companies should transition to physical supply chain certification models, as well as supporting independent smallholders. And this is really critical too, because shifting supply chains to physical supplies of certified sustainable palm oil will bring greater transparency. And it requires companies along the way to build a relationship with their suppliers and increase supplier engagement. So segregated and identity preserved certified sustainable palm oil also allows brands to show that the actual physical palm oil they use is from sustainable sources and not linked to deforestation, conversion. Now, we know, that being said, we know that in some cases, such as for complex derivatives or palm oil produced for independent smallholders, and I think I saw a question about smallholders as well, we know that in these cases it can be difficult to source from physical supplies of certified sustainable palm oil. And that's the reason why we still need to have a book and claim system which can really help, kickstart transformation by making it easy and affordable for brands to support growers that are SPO certified. But as much as possible, sorry.
I see. Indeed, there's a close call between the questions now, and one of them is actually indeed on the topic of when is it, let's say, advisable to use credits, maybe when sourcing 100% physical CSPO is not possible. So I won't let you go over this so quickly. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on this one.
Absolutely, sorry, I'm not monitoring them that closely, and I didn't see that the exact question just came up. No, absolutely, I think this is really key. We know that in some cases it can be like I was saying, it can be difficult to source physical supply chains, and I know that that's the case for derivatives. And again, the smallholder question comes back again. Palm oil produced by independent smallholders can be difficult to source in physical supplies, and that's why I think the book and claim system can really help from that perspective. And what I was going to say as well is just more generally, for a company starting, again, not from the perspective of a front runner in the industry, but for a company starting the transformation, it can be a really helpful way to just get started and really start supporting growers that are SPO certified, because as we know, there's very much still a demand problem. We know that we have just 20% of palm oil produced globally that's SPO certified, but not even that is fully taken up as certified material. So we definitely need to increase those demand signals. And wherever, for whatever reason, it may be difficult to immediately source physical supplies, absolutely going through the book and claim system can be a really helpful way to start and a helpful way to send those signals and contribute to that transformation. And but I just say that's about the book and claim system more broadly. I think a lot of this would apply as well to mass balance, as long as there's a really robust due diligence system involved to make sure that the volumes aren't linked to deforestation, conversion, human rights abuse. But on book and claim, I think it's really important to highlight as well in the context of the webinar that if companies do purchase credits, as much as possible, these should be independent smallholder credits, because I think that support is really important for smallholders who may be unable or may struggle to connect to physical supply chains. And
maybe it's nice to mention that they can be bought separately on the RSPO website. Personally, if you go to the buying and selling page of the RSPO trading platform, there is IS in front of the CSPO and PKO credits. So definitely agree that that's a valuable thing to do.
Yeah, really, yeah, exactly. And these premiums that are associated with independent smallholder credits are really key to support smallholders in that transition to sustainable production practices, because we know that there's, and I think linking to another question that came up there's definitely a lack at the moment of on the ground support for smallholders, not only in Southeast Asia but also in other palm oil growing areas, and we need to do whatever we can to help provide the technical and financial capacity to help those smallholders become RSPO certified. And
yeah, that brings me to another question that actually has a real X that's scoring really high. So, technical team, Owen, can I ask you to give the floor to Rushank Bardiola to ask his question, please?
Yes, you can. Just give me one moment.
I'm very aware that it wasn't the question with the highest vote now, but that doesn't have an X. So,
Roshank, you should be able to speak now.
Hi everyone.
Hi.
I hope everyone's doing fine.
Yes, thank you for joining us.
Yes.
Do you want to ask your question?
Yes, I would love to ask my question. And you know, I used to be a banker for a long time, and after that I moved to Ghana to do sustainable palm oil. And I see a real disconnect in what, like, I am attending a lot of these conferences, but when I'm on ground, there is no, like, it is having these sustainable certifications, having RSPO certifications, people being trained. All I hear about is Malaysia, Indonesia, and big plantations. I don't know why is there no focus on smallholders, and like someone like me, I do not have deep pockets like big companies. How do I become a front runner? You know, right now I have to be dependent on funding or grants which I get, and that might be too late, right? So I have products which are sustainable, but I cannot show to the world it is sustainable. Why is it so difficult for smallholders and everything focused towards big plantation? Because in Ghana, 70% of plantation is owned by smallholders, and all the focus is on big plantation.
Maybe I should chip in here. I think as Solidaridad, you know, I normally work for Solidaridad. It's a civil society organization, and we run quite a extensive program in Ghana to support, in particular, smaller palm oil farmers with sustainable practices. So I would really invite you to take a look at the Solidaridad website.
I have been there. I went to the office. They came to my factory as well. But it is like, that's what I'm just saying, that there is a disconnect. You know, we are talking about all of this, but on ground, you know, there is a disconnect, and it would be difficult to not like, at least for last 5 years where I have been, there are so many smallholders. I might be the only one who got in touch with Solidaridad, because I come from Europe, so I know that there are these possibilities, but I do not see any programs which are running on the ground particularly. And these are, like, there are a lot of and a lot of people do not even have money to get all these programs. There is a disconnect on the ground. And
Thank you.
This is my question.
Well, I think it's a point of attention for all. Let's not focus only on Asia, because I've heard the same comment from Latin America various times, and they do a lot of, there are a lot of innovations there as well. So I think your point is well noted, and thank you. And if you want to be further in touch on this point, I think, let's have it offline.
I want to say that I have been selected by Luxembourg government, and I am building a blockchain to increase transparency on this.
Wow! Congratulations.
So I found an alternative way to RSPO because I could not afford it. So I'm building something which the user will eventually have full transparency on my product.
Wow! Well, keep us posted, I would say. And just if you want to drop me an email about it after the webinar, I would really like that. And now I would propose, there was one question upvoted with 8 votes to Sabrina. It was by Katrien Demopoulos, but without an X, so I will ask it. Sabrina, what do you think about the current landscape and jurisdictional approach projects in Indonesia, particularly in Aceh and around Leuser ecosystem?
Thank you, Marieke. I unfortunately, being based in the UK, I'm not as connected to the day-to-day on the ground as some of my colleagues in Asia. I think it's in general, of course, and that's part of the recommendations and some of the elements that we score as well in our scorecard, that involvement of companies in on-the-ground projects to support conservation and smallholders and sustainability outcomes broadly in jurisdictional and landscape approaches is absolutely critical. And I absolutely, and again, won't be able to speak to the detail of the specific projects that are mentioned there, but I'm sure it will be room for progress in all of them. But that initiative and that collaboration on the ground is a really critical element. Again, if we want companies to go away from just mitigating the risks of their supply chains to actually supporting an industry that actually benefits people and nature, that's really critical. But yeah, Marieke, I'm wondering, and I saw you raise your hand. Would you like to say anything specific?
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to say that actually the next webinar will be with two speakers from Conservation International, who are running a project on the ground in that area. So that's on 13th of April. I will have a little slide on that at the end. So I hope we can have, let's say, some more contact also with the actual situation on the ground in that webinar as well. I see 2 more questions that got quite some votes and so I'll just ask these as well, and then we'll go back to the scripted questions, I guess. Sanne Strandskov asks, what are you doing to make the end consumer more aware of the use of sustainable palm oil?
Yeah, that's a really critical question. I think it's absolutely, it's not one that's on the slide, but it's one that is reflected in the recommendations. I think it's really promoting consumer awareness is a really key part of the puzzle on this as well, and we really need, and I'll get back to what we are doing, but we really need companies as well, going back to how to be a front runner. It's really helpful if companies help increase consumer awareness and, again, demand for sustainable palm oil. And I think that's particularly key in less mature sustainability markets. It's also really important in Europe. We see that, again, there's the whole question around boycotts and all the misconceptions that we refer to, but especially in maybe even less mature sustainability markets like China, India, Malaysia, Indonesia, who actually consume most of the world's palm oil. It's really critical to help build the business case for more companies to source sustainable palm oil and build that critical mass to transform the sector. And I think a lot of what we are doing from that perspective is, and happy to go back to it if it's helpful in the discussion, but is around our palm oil buyer scorecard. It's really a really nice way for consumers to see what their brands and retailers and the companies that they recognize that they buy from every day, to see what they're doing to support the sustainable palm oil industry, because it's sometimes hard as a consumer to have that information. And we also have, and I know in the UK we have that, but across the global network, there will be lots of other examples of little apps, for example, for consumers to identify which products contain sustainable palm oil and drive more sustainable choices. But I think the scorecard can be a really helpful one, where there are, even if you go on the website, there are ways in which you can actually tweet your favorite brand or contact them directly to really ask them to take action. And again, as a consumer, if you're not in this field day to day, it's sometimes hard to know even what to ask. And with the scorecard, you have suggestions or specific recommendations that you can, specific requests actually that you can make. And I think for companies to feel that those asks coming directly from their consumers will be really powerful in driving that transformation.
Thank you. I have to admit that the SPOC initiative is also always interested to reach consumers, but we feel it's not easy. So any suggestions you may have, let's say, on what would be effective or ideas, I would highly welcome that. My contact details are at the end of the slide deck, and any emails on this topic are very welcome. I see another question here voted up by Caspar Sundmark, also without X. So, we are a brand owner for makeup and skincare products. We only use palm oil derivatives. At the moment, the highest grade that is available is Mass Balance, SPO. How do we get the chemical raw material manufacturers to also commit to this in order to get the next level, for example, segregated?
It's a great question, and I see that there's already a bit of an element of response there from Sam, from Waitrose, and I absolutely corroborate that. I think collaboration is really needed on that. We know it's not easy, and that's why I mentioned that as a bit of an example on physical supplies can be hard to achieve for derivatives in particular, and obviously that would be the case in the chemical sector a lot. But I think, like Sam is saying, if there is sufficient aggregate demand for a shift to segregated derivatives, then that will make that transformation easier. In the meantime, I think mass balance can be an acceptable alternative, but then I think that it would be good to make sure that you're really helping drive that transformation, to have that engagement with suppliers, to ask them to have a robust NDP policy as well, and to monitor that, and to really implement a really robust due diligence system to make sure that those volumes aren't linked to deforestation conversion in the ground. But in the meantime, I think mass balance can be, if there isn't physical supply available, then that definitely should be the second best, but by adding those complementary initiatives to ensure the sustainability of the supplies is really key.
I realize, the time is flying. We have only about 10 more minutes left, so I'll decide, we'll do the questions from the audience and we'll focus on that. Jannike van Bruggen asks, there are recent reports on deforestation activities that can be linked to companies with NDPE policies. What do you think is needed to prevent that in the future? And what do you think companies can do better?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question too. It's not an easy challenge, is it? Yeah, I think a lot of this goes back to that knowledge of where your supplies come from, and that ability to be able to monitor on the ground, which is linked to traceability, which again doesn't guarantee sustainability, but really enables that action to be taken when there are issues that are raised. There's also obviously a problem around implementation of NDP policies. So I think really engaging suppliers to follow guidance in the accountability framework in terms of implementation and reporting is really key. And there's huge amounts of guidance there, not only for suppliers themselves, but for companies to know what responsible supply chain management looks like, and really helpful recommendation. I don't think in the next 10 minutes we'll get the time to get into the detail of that, but I think in particular the operational guidance on supply chain management in the accountability framework can be really helpful for that. And I think there's also, as a bit of a comment there, it is a shared responsibility for everyone along the supply chain to contribute to getting to a fully sustainable industry. And I think there are some findings from a report that I'm happy to pop in the chat if helpful, that we released last year with ZSL as well, on an analysis of the ACOP reports of 2020 that really shows that if you look at the different sections of the supply chain, really the downstream part, retailers and consumer good manufacturers are leading the way towards 100% RSPO certification. There's still a lot of room for progress, and I can't show you it on the screen, but I'll just put the link in there. And I think where there's really space for, there's space for action everywhere, but there's I think a really clear call to action here for growers and processors and traders that, for example, for growers, only 21% of them are reaching 100% RSPO certification and similar percentage for processors and traders versus 54-58% for consumer goods manufacturers and retailers. So yeah, I think increasing and strengthening that engagement with growers, processors, and traders, I think will be really key. But yeah, just another comment, a few suggestions there.
Thank you. We'll do the second polling question, please, technical team. The question is, it all sounds like a lot of work to do sustainable palm oil. Are we sure it is really not better to ban the use of palm oil altogether? Can I get the results? And then I propose after this, we'll talk a little bit more about the plans for the next scorecard and the question by Monique van Wijnbergen and maybe the one about ISPO. And then we should really close it, I think. Can we see the results of the poll? Very convinced audience. So I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on the questions. Sabrina, if you want to comment very shortly.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. Without getting into huge amounts of detail, just as a comment, it's, I mean, obviously there's a really big percentage of people that agree that boycotting is not the way, but for the 9% left, I don't know how many people that represents, it's really, yeah, I think we really need to look into the unintended consequences, because we know, again, very briefly, palm oil is an incredibly efficient crop, and just shifting to others, to soybean or coconut oil, you know, will have consequences on, it will just require more land, or have to shift the problem to other parts of the world. And similarly, from a demand perspective, just switching to other alternative oils is just likely to just shift demand elsewhere and to buyers and consuming countries that maybe have less discerning, less stringent procurement policies in terms of sustainability. And yeah, there's more we could say around that, but we definitely feel that boycotting isn't the answer, but that demanding more action to tackle the issues and go further and faster really is. And that would apply not only to palm oil, but also, of course, to soy and coconut and all these other potential alternatives as well. But I'll stop there.
Yeah, thank you. I see two questions actually relate to more action. Herbin Raja Guguk asks, in Indonesia, the government has mandated to all companies to be certified according to the Indonesian Sustainable Palm Oil scheme. Do you think that's good enough for being sustainable palm oil?
Yeah, thank you. I think we definitely welcome and support efforts by producer countries to develop and implement these national initiatives and standards for sustainable palm oil production and trade. I think it's also really important that there's engagement to continue to strengthen and improve them. And I think there's a lot that can be learned from our SPO and from palm oil innovation groups. So there's I think there would still be room for improvement, as there would be room for improvement in our SPO, but definitely, of course, any steps in that direction are really welcome. I don't think I'd say it would be necessarily good enough, because again, we're in this webinar discussing leadership and opportunities to go further and drive faster transformation. But it's definitely a helpful step, and it's a helpful initiative for sure.
Thank you. Yeah. I think this is the final question we take from the audience. About the 8 recommendations from Monique van Wijnbergen, can Sabrina elaborate on the recommendation invest in landscapes on the ground? What are some of the concrete actions WWF proposes? For example, in production landscapes of independent smallholders, for example, South America.
Yeah, thank you for that. We're actually, just because it's part of our recommendations and it's part of the elements that we score in our scorecard, we're pulling together some proposals for companies for it to be easier for companies to, but as I said, I also saw Michelle, put some opportunities there. There are lots of examples of really helpful projects. I think it's that taking the step to to support jurisdictional and landscape approaches on the ground and conservation projects is already in itself a really helpful step. And then in terms of the specific projects, I'm happy, and I know my contact details are in the slides as well. I'm happy to get in touch, because I wouldn't be able to say it immediately, but we're pulling together some potential proposals there as well from WWF that we could. I don't know if we'd have specific South American projects, but we absolutely know that, you know, our country offices in South America are looking a lot into growing production of palm oil and sustainability there. So I'm sure there could be opportunities too. And yeah, I'll pause there. But happy to pick it up maybe by email separately. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabrina. Final question and point. I know you're also working on a new scorecard initiative. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that? What's coming?
Absolutely, very happy to. So yeah, the scorecard, the 2020 scorecard, for those that haven't seen it, you can find it on palmoilscorecard.panda.org. And we are, like you say, Marieke, we're definitely planning a new version, a new iteration of the scorecard for the end of this year. So we're at the moment just revising the methodology and the company selection. So if you haven't heard from us yet, that's normal. We haven't reached out to companies, but that will happen over the next few months. So yeah, more to follow on this, and with publication coming in 2021. I might also say that in terms of follow-up, because the last scorecard was published in January 2020, there has been some additional elements that have been published on it. For those that only checked at the beginning of the year, we've also published around September, October, some case studies with much more detailed information on, I think it's 30 or 40 companies, on the challenges that they're encountering, the solutions that they're implementing. So it provides a lot more qualitative and in-depth information that you may see just in a company profile on the scorecard. So it's worth having a look. It's all, this case study is also linked on the website. When you go online, it's the first, there's a pop-up that leads you straight there. So there's more content to check already since the last scorecard on the same website, and a new scorecard to come in the autumn.
Thank you. Yeah. And we also do, let's say, little articles on companies that we see as a front runner on the SPOC website, just FYI. So it's 11:51 in the Netherlands where I am. That means that the time for this webinar has really run through in my mind. Can I see the final polling question, please? And this is, has this discussion changed your mind about palm oil? I'm very curious about the answer. And while you are filling that in, I will tell you that the next webinar is taking place on 13th of April. And it will be about the impact of sustainable palm oil on the ground with John Buchanan and Fitri Hasibuan of Conservation International on their Coalition for Sustainable Livelihood. So it will really dig down on what's happening in Indonesia. Surely we'll keep you posted through the SPOC website and LinkedIn and Twitter. And for now, can I see the results of the poll? Has this good? So we're completely useless. I don't know, maybe the question should have been different. Maybe it should have been, have you learned something? Well, I learned from this at least. At least we have, let's say, for 6 people changed their mind. Well, every 6 counts. So after this webinar, we will do this SPOC exchange. At least Sabrina and me and our technical team will hang around for at least 10 to 20 minutes, depending on how many people there are. But please don't feel obliged. You're really welcome. But for now, I would like to thank Sabrina for joining us today, and all of you participants for asking these very interesting questions. I hope it was useful, even though it did not change many people's minds. And I look forward to seeing you in the chat or in the next time. And thanks again for listening, everybody from all over the place. And thanks again for your interest in this topic. It's really important. And bye-bye. I will go to the chat now and see if there are people there.